chill swept through the chamber. The candle flame guttered, throwing wild shadows on the walls. Antonio's breath caught. The air felt charged, alive with a presence lurking beyond the lantern's reach. He slowly set the mask back onto the altar and listened. Somewhere in the dark, a sound like a distant sigh echoed around the circular room. "Hello?" Antonio whispered, the same word he had called into the dark corridor the night before. This time, he was answered. From a shadowed corner of the vault came a soft rustling, like enormous wings unfolding. Antonio spun toward the sound, squinting into the dimness. He saw only shifting darkness, yet he felt something coalesce, an unseen being with mass and intent watching him. His skin prickled as he clutched the crucifix at his neck. An overwhelming sense of being judged by an ancient intelligence pressed down on him. Without warning, the candle's flame surged bright as a torch. Antonio staggered back, shielding his eyes from the sudden glare. In that searing radiance, a tall figure appeared before the altar, wings outstretched to fill the chamber. Its form shimmered, not entirely of this world. Antonio's eyes brimmed with tears, and a soft cry escaped his lips. He couldn't tell if it was born of terror or awe. The radiant figure itself was the source of the light. Though humanoid in outline, no clear face was visible within the white gold glow, save for two eyes like smoldering embers. A deep vibration filled the air. Antonio pressed his back to the wall, caught between the urge to bow in reverence and the urge to flee in terror. Antonio's mind reeled, cast down for seeking a greater light, a prophecy of terror. Was this truly a fallen angel before him? He could barely breathe. His faith and fear warred within as he prayed silently for guidance. The figure stood silent. With trembling resolve, Antonio found himself rising from his knees. The being's ember eyes tracked his every movement. Though its face was indistinct, he sensed something like curiosity emanating from it, as if it were as intrigued by him as he was terrified of it. Antonio's voice emerged in a strained whisper. Who are you?" For a long moment, the being did not reply. The only sound was Antonio's ragged breathing and the distant drip of water in the catacombs. Then an answer blossomed in his mind, not as thunder but as a gentle, sorrow-laced thought. "I was one of the Watchers appointed to guide mankind at the dawn of your race. For my compassion, I was cast out and chained beneath this holy city you call Rome." Antonio blinked at the words forming inside him. One of the Watchers. He recalled forbidden apocrypha of the fallen angels in Noah's time. An angel of the Lord. One of the Watchers, he breathed, barely believing. The being's aura pulsed with melancholic affirmation. "Watcher, fallen angel. The titles you give us mean little now." The voice resonated softly within his conscience. Tears streaked Antonio's cheeks before he realized he was weeping. The angel story, if true, reframed biblical events in disturbing light. Antonio's lifelong certainties quaked. Could God's justice be so severe, or was this fallen spirit twisting the truth? "You could be deceiving me," Antonio whispered, wiping tears from his face. "Perhaps you are a devil in angel's guise testing my faith." Even as he spoke, the words felt hollow. There was too much sorrow and truth in what he had heard. A low, gentle laugh echoed off the stone walls, a sound devoid of joy. "You are wise to be cautious," the voice conceded, tinged with bittersweet respect. "I have had ages to reflect. If sharing knowledge was my sin, perhaps I sin even now by speaking these truths." The great angel seemed to study him. Then it asked softly, "Tell me, Antonio, did you believe your church serves the light as purely as it claims? If so, why keep such secrets buried? Why punish those who yearn to uplift your kind?" Antonio had no answer. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. Why indeed? Monsignor Vincenzi's haunted face flashed in his memory, the mysterious warnings, the hidden archive files. The church he loved had concealed this being's existence for centuries. He felt the foundations of his world trembling. "I cannot answer," Antonio admitted shakily. "I never imagined any of this." His voice was small in the darkness. A silence fell. Antonio could hear his heart pounding. When he finally looked up, the angelic figure had drawn nearer, only an arm's length away. He tensed, but the being made no move to harm him. Instead, it slowly extended a glowing hand. In it lay the bronze mask, the key of the abyss, which Antonio had left on the altar. Somehow, the angel now held it. Antonio hesitated. His fingers hovered over the mask's cold metal surface. "What would you have me do?" he whispered, voice cracking. The question brimmed with dread and yearning both. He knew what the angel desired: freedom. But to free a fallen angel, it was unthinkable. Yet how could he condemn this being to eternal bondage after all he had witnessed? Before the angel could answer, distant voices and footfalls echoed from the passage outside. Antonio's heart seized in alarm as echoes of urgent shouts and torchlight flickered down the corridor. The secret guardians of the Vatican were coming. In that panicked moment, one desperate resolve crystallized in his mind. He must not let them destroy this angel before he learned the full truth. "We were cast down for seeking the light beyond his light. Bound here under rock and holy throne, I wait as the ages pass like a dream of ash. My wings are shackled by sanctified chains, my voice silenced by stone and prayer. Ye who find me, beware. The truth of my origin and fall would shatter your fragile virtue. Fear what lies beneath your illusions of faith. For when the final trumpet sounds, and the last seal is broken, the chains will break and even the saints will tremble at what emerges from the abyss. Know this: the halls above were built upon lies to cover the sins of the sky. Your fathers knew and cowered, hiding the key to the abyss beneath a mantle of holiness. The day comes when darkness and light shall trade places, and all you worship will be dust and memory beneath our wings." By the next midnight, Father Antonio steeled himself and slipped into the bowels of St. Peter's Basilica, with only a flickering lantern to light his way. The grand church above lay silent and dark. Only a few votive candles by distant tombs guided his steps as he slipped beyond the public grottos into uncharted catacombs where no one ventured without mandate. Antonio's heart hammered as he crept along a narrow corridor of stacked skulls and bones. The air was damp. Every drip of water and scuff of his boot echoed unnaturally loud. He felt he was walking among restless dead, trespassing where no living soul was meant to roam. At last, just beyond a martyr's gravestone, he found a moth-eaten tapestry on a damp wall, exactly as the letter described. Antonio drew it aside with trembling fingers. Behind it stood a rough-hewn stone door, marked with a faded red cross. Antonio set down his lantern and tugged at the padlock. The corroded metal crumbled at his touch and fell with a muffled clang. He froze, holding his breath, but only silence answered, save for the drum of his heartbeat. Swallowing hard, he pushed the heavy door open. The stone door groaned inward, exhaling a breath of stagnant air. Antonio raised his lantern and stepped over the threshold, crossing himself as he entered the forbidden vault. The chamber was small and circular, carved from the bedrock. By the lantern's glow, he saw walls covered in strange inscriptions, Latin and Greek intertwined with an older script he did not recognize. In the center stood a low altar of black granite, upon which rested a bronze mask shaped like a serene angelic face, green with age. Antonio gently lifted the mask. It was heavy, and along its inner rim he spotted a Latin inscription, Clavis Abyssi, Key of the Abyss, also etched in Greek letters and mysterious sigils. He was standing where those priests had stood long ago, performing rites to lock something or someone away. The carved verse on the wall sent a jolt through Antonio's soul. A fallen star, a key to the abyss. This vault was a prison, and he had unwittingly opened it. The bronze mask, the key of the abyss, must have been a tool of the binding. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the vault, and the lantern flame guttered, sending shadows leaping. Antonio's breath caught. The air itself felt charged and alive, as if unseen eyes were watching from just beyond the light. He set the mask back on the altar, and as he did so, a soft sigh resonated from the darkness around him. "Hello?" he whispered again. From a dark corner came a soft rustling, like enormous wings unfolding. Antonio squinted into the dimness. He saw only shifting shadows, yet he felt a presence with mass and intent. His skin prickled as he clutched his crucifix. He felt judged by an ancient intelligence. In answer, the lantern's flame flared bright as a torch. Antonio staggered back, shielding his eyes against the sudden glare. In that searing radiance, A tall figure appeared before the altar, wings outstretched to fill the chamber. Its form shimmered, not entirely of this world. Antonio's eyes filled with tears, and a soft cry escaped his lips, whether of fear or awe he could not tell. The radiant figure itself was the source of light. Though humanoid in shape, its face was indiscernible within the white-gold glow. Save for two eyes like embers, a deep vibration filled the air. Antonio flattened himself against the wall, caught between dropping to his knees in worship and fleeing in terror. His mind raced, struggling to process the entity's proclamation, cast down for seeking a greater light, a day coming when even saints would tremble. The implications were staggering. Was this truly a fallen angel before him? Antonio's heart quailed. The being stood silent. Antonio's own devotion warred with dread. He slowly rose from where he'd knelt, forcing himself to stand. The ember eyes watched, full of inscrutable curiosity. "Who are you?" Antonio managed to whisper. For a long moment, only Antonio's ragged breathing and the drip of water answered. Then the answer came, not in thunder, but in a soft voice blossoming within his mind. "I was one of the Watchers who guided mankind in its first days. For that compassion, I was cast out and bound beneath Rome." Antonio's mouth went dry. A tremor passed through him. He realized how little he truly understood his faith's secret history. "An angel of the Lord, one of the Watchers," he breathed. The being's aura pulsed sadly. Antonio felt a wave of melancholic affirmation wash over him. He remembered the story of Lucifer's fall taught in catechism, pride and rebellion. But the angel's tale sounded different, a tragedy of seeking knowledge rather than power. His seminary lessons had even mentioned a forbidden verse he'd nearly forgotten until now. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the great day. An Epistle of Jude, secret archive translation. Those secret words now rang true before Antonio's eyes. Everlasting chains under darkness. Here stood one such chained angel, speaking to him. Antonio's fear slowly gave way to a burning need to know more. "What knowledge did you share that was so forbidden?" Antonio asked at last, his voice trembling with desperate curiosity. "I sought to elevate your kind," the angel's voice continued, and Antonio's mind swam with fleeting visions. A radiant heavenly city where angels gathered in devotion. Then these beings descending to earth in ancient days, gently teaching humans the secrets of creation to ease their suffering. Antonio glimpsed the nobility of their intent, the bright flame of compassion that drove them. But the vision shifted to wrath and punishment, blazing swords cutting down the benevolent angels, a great flood drowning the world. Antonio felt the angel's anguish as its gifts were repaid with divine wrath. "Your God struck humanity to purge the knowledge we shared," the voice whispered bitterly. "We who sought to uplift you were hunted by our own brethren. Some of us were slain. Others, like myself, were bound in darkness to await judgment." Tears streaked Antonio's face. This tale painted scripture in harrowing new colors. Could God's justice be so harsh, or was the angel twisting the story for sympathy? "You could be lying," Antonio said softly, wiping his sleeve across his eyes. He wanted to cling to his faith's clarity of good and evil. "Maybe this is a test. Maybe you're a devil wearing an angel's face to deceive me." But even as he spoke, the words felt hollow. There was too much sorrow in this creature's account, too much that echoed hidden scriptures. A gentle, sorrowful laugh emanated from the being, like a sigh. "You are wise to be cautious," it conceded. "Perhaps I err yet again by revealing these truths to you?" The angel's burning eyes fixed on Antonio. "Tell me, Antonio, do you think your church truly serves the light as it claims? Then hide such secrets. Why strike down those who only wish to share the light's gifts?" The questions struck like arrows of doubt. Antonio had no answer. He simply looked down. The foundations of his faith quaked beneath the weight of this revelation. "I cannot answer," Antonio admitted, voice shaking. "I never imagined." He trailed off, clutching his rosary. A silence. Antonio dared to look up again. The angel stood closer than before, towering over him. Instinctively, Antonio tensed, but it made no hostile move. Slowly, the angel extended a luminous hand. In its palm lay the bronze mask, the key of the abyss, offered back to him. Antonio hesitated, then gingerly took the mask. Its metal was cool. "What do you want me to do?" he whispered, heart pounding. He knew full well the angel wanted freedom. To free a fallen angel, it was unthinkable. Yet how could he leave it bound in eternal torment now? Before Sariel, for so Antonio decided to name it, could answer, new sounds made Antonio jump. The echo of distant voices and rushing footsteps down the catacomb passage. He glimpsed an orange glow. Torchlight. The secret keepers of this place had sensed the breach. They were coming. The angel tilted its head toward the noise, urgent light flaring around it. "The keepers of this place awaken," it communicated, a note of warning in the thought. "They will not be as receptive to my story as you have been." Antonio's heart thundered. He suddenly understood. If they found Sariel here, they would surely subdue or destroy it, and likely him as well. A protectiveness surged in him. "I must not let them harm this angel," he resolved. Antonio huddled close to the angel's shimmering form. "Hide," he whispered, voice tight. I'll come back for you, I promise. But you can't be here when they..." Sariel regarded him, ember eyes thoughtful. Then, with a soft sweep of luminescent wings, the angel stepped back. Its form seemed to dissolve into the darkness until only a faint shimmer remained at the vault's edges. The vault fell silent and still, as if the angel had never been. Breathing hard, Antonio slipped out the stone door and pulled it shut. He tugged the tapestry back from the entrance just as torchlight flooded the corridor. "Father Antonio," Cardinal Salvotti's voice rang out as he approached with 2 Swiss guards and a hooded monk. The cardinal's face was livid. Antonio tried to compose himself, but his racing heart and the bronze mask heavy inside his robes betrayed him. Before he could speak, the guard seized his arms. "What have you done?" Salvotti hissed, sweeping past him into the now sealed vault. Finding the doorstone ajar and the lock destroyed, the cardinal's face blanched. He swiftly turned on Antonio, fury and fear contorting his features. "You foolish boy!" Antonio struggled in the guard's grip. "Your Eminence, I can explain." Salvotti silenced him with an upraised hand. "Not another word." He nodded sharply to the monk. "Bind him, and bring the door everything up to the chapel now." The guards yanked Antonio's hands behind him and roughly tied them with a cord. As they dragged him away, Antonio caught one last glimpse of the tapestry-covered vault. "Hold on," he prayed silently to Sariel. "I'll return." His pleas met only silence. Woe to the keepers of the secret, for the hour of unveiling draws nigh. The first seal is broken. The herald of doom stirs in his prison. Let not the righteous slumber, for the time of trembling is at hand. Fragment from the Prophecy of St. Vicarius, 1483. Antonio didn't know how long he knelt on the cold stone floor, trembling in the aftermath of the voice's onslaught. When he finally dared to lift his eyes, the chamber was dim once more. The lantern's flame had dwindled to a weak glimmer. Yet the angelic figure remained, a faint aura of pallid light outlining its tall form in the darkness. It stood silent and still by the black altar, as though patiently awaiting his next move. Every fiber of Antonio's being quivered between reverence and terror. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend the entity's proclamations, cast down for seeking a greater light, a coming day when even saints would tremble. Was this truly a fallen angel standing before him? Antonio's heart quailed. The being watched him silently. For a moment, Antonio's devotion battled his fear. Finally, he mustered his courage and rose unsteadily to his feet. The ember eyes followed him. Though its face was featureless brilliance, he sensed an almost curious regard from the figure. Antonio's voice shook as he broke the silence. Who are you?" For a long moment, the only sound was Antonio's ragged breathing and the drip of water in the tunnel behind him. Then a gentle answer bloomed in his mind. "I was one of the Watchers, appointed to guide mankind in its first days. For that, I was cast out and chained beneath this holy city." Antonio's mouth went dry. He recognized that term, watchers, the fallen angels of Noah's day from apocryphal texts. An angel of the Lord, a watcher. He whispered in awe. The being's aura pulsed, filled with sorrow. Antonio felt a melancholic truth confirm his words. He recalled the familiar story of Lucifer's prideful fall, but this angel's tale felt different, a tragedy born of compassion. His mind flashed back to a heretical passage he'd once seen in secret, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the great day. Epistle of Jude, suppressed translation. Now before Antonio's eyes stood one of those very angels in chains under darkness. Fear warred with compassion within him. He needed to know more. What did you do? What truth could be worth your exile? He asked, voice barely above a breath. The angel's response came in images and words. I sought to uplift your kind, it said, and Antonio's mind swam with brief visions of a heavenly city of light and angels descending to earth in ancient times. He saw shining beings teaching early humans about fire, healing, and the stars, acts of kindness. But then the visions darkened. He saw mighty angels with swords of flame storming down upon those teachers, saw a great flood drowning a world, heard screams and then silence. Antonio flinched as the angel's voice, tinged with bitterness, whispered, The Almighty punished mankind to erase the knowledge we shared. We, the Watchers, were hunted by our own brethren. Some were slain. I and others were bound in darkness to await judgment. Antonio realized tears were running down his cheeks. The angel's story, if true, upended everything. Could God truly punish so harshly? He wanted to deny it, to retreat to the clear lines of good and evil he'd always known. You could be deceiving me, Antonio said, voice trembling. He dashed away his tears angrily. Perhaps you're a devil in disguise trying to trick me. Even as he said it, the accusation felt weak. The grief and sincerity radiating from the being were undeniable. A low, sad laugh reverberated through the vault. Caution becomes you, the angel conceded. Perhaps I err yet again by sharing these truths with you. There was no malice in its tone, only regret. The ember eyes regarded him kindly now. Tell me, Antonio, it thought spoke. Does your church truly serve the light by hiding such truths? Why must knowledge be a sin? Why must we remain shackled and silent? Antonio opened his mouth, but no answer came. He thought of Monsignor Vincenzi's warning, of the church's deliberate silence. Why indeed? His entire life he had believed in the purity of the church's mission. Now doubt gnawed at his soul. I cannot answer that, he admitted at last, voice barely audible. I never imagined any of this. The angel's radiance softened. It stepped closer, near enough that Antonio felt gentle warmth radiating from it. Slowly, it extended a glowing hand toward him. In its palm lay the bronze mask, the key of the abyss. It was offering the key back to him, as if entrusting him with its fate. Antonio hesitated. With a trembling hand, he accepted the mask. It felt cold and impossibly heavy now. He gazed up at the being. What do you want me to do? For the first time, the angel's reply was audible, a whisper on the still air. Free me. The two simple words rang in Antonio's mind like a bell. His heart thundered. To free this being, was that not an unforgivable sin? Or was it an act of mercy long overdue? Antonio found himself at the fulcrum of an unthinkable decision. Before he could speak, a noise shattered the moment. Distant shouts and the tramp of bootsteps echoing down the corridor outside. Torchlight flickered beyond the threshold. The angel's head snapped toward the passage, its aura intensifying. Antonio realized in alarm the Vatican's secret guardians were coming. If they found him here with the angel, they would surely attack it and him. Hide, Antonio hissed urgently, shoving the mask into his robes. Please. He didn't know what a being of light could do to hide, but he had to try something. The angel inclined its head. At once its blazing form began to dim, dissolving into the darkness like mist. In seconds the vault was empty save for Antonio and shadows. Antonio spun around just as the stone door was flung wide. A half-dozen figures spilled in. Cardinal Salvotti at the front, flanked by Swiss guards and robed exorcists. Their torches bathed the chamber in a harsh glow. "What is the meaning of this?" Salvotti thundered, taking in the disturbed altar, the still sputtering candle, the open mask box. His eyes fell on Antonio, who stood frozen in the center of the vault. "Father Antonio," the cardinal whispered, voice low and furious. "What have you done?" Antonio's lips moved, but no sound came. Two guards seized him by the arms. Salvotti's face was contorted with a mix of rage and dread. In silence, he gestured sharply to the others. Immediately, one priest began sprinkling holy water and reciting a Latin prayer. Another carefully lifted the bronze mask from Antonio's trembling hands. When Salvotti turned back to Antonio, his voice was deathly quiet. "You have no idea what forces you've meddled with." Antonio caught a glimpse of motion behind the cluster of clergy, just a faint shimmer in the air near the chamber's corner. Sariel is still here, he realized, lurking unseen. A desperate courage flared in Antonio's chest. "Your Eminence, listen," he burst out. "It's not what you think." "Be silent," Salvotti snapped. "That thing is no angel of God. It is a demon with a silver tongue. Do not presume you understand what you've unleashed. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Epistle of St. Paul, secret commentary. So for your heresy, Father." Antonio's mind whirled. They meant to bind Sariel again, or worse. The priests had already begun an incantation, Latin words he recognized as a rite of imprisonment. "No," his soul cried. If they succeeded, Sariel would be entombed forever and the truth lost. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a flicker of movement, the faint outline of Sariel near the open door. The angel's presence pressed at the edges of his mind, filled with resolve. It would not be taken so easily again. Antonio felt the key of the abyss still hidden in his robe. No one had realized he got it back. Hands bound behind him, he grasped the mask through the fabric. Its metal was strangely warm now, vibrating with energy. The exorcist's chant rose in intensity. "Adjuramus te revertere in abyssum." An unnatural wind whipped through the vault, snuffing candles and rattling bones in the walls. One of the robed monks faltered, as a deep groan emanated from the very stone under their feet. A voice, soundless yet everywhere, whispered in Antonio's consciousness. "Now." In a surge of clarity, Antonio wrenched free of the guard's loose grip amid the confusion. With bound hands, he whipped the bronze mask from beneath his robe and dashed toward the altar. "Stop him!" shrieked one of the clergy, but Antonio was beyond stopping. He hurled himself and the mask onto the granite altar where the open vault door still lay. With all his strength, he slammed the mask onto the carved stone cross of the door. An explosive crack split the air. Blinding white light erupted along the seams of the ancient doorstone. The chanting ceased in gasps and cries. Antonio was thrown back by a wave of force. He hit the ground as the bronze mask clattered away, but he saw it had done its work. A jagged fissure now split the middle of the altar and the doorstone upon it. "God save us," one monk breathed, stumbling backward. Smoke hissed from the widening crack in the floor. The stench of sulfur and centuries of decay billowed forth. Cardinal Salvotti's face went ashen. "What have you done?" he shouted over the rising wind. By way of answer, a pair of burning eyes ignited within the darkness of the fissure. Antonio shielded his face as a towering shadow unfurled, wings spanning the vault, and Sariel rose from the abyss in all its unbound glory. For a heartbeat, everyone was struck dumb by the sight. The angel's once soft aura was now a searing corona of light. Broken chains dangled from its wrists. It cast one furious glance around at the mortals who had kept it caged. "Run!" The command wasn't shouted. It emanated from Sariel like thunder in the mind. A single terrifying syllable of judgment. Antonio's wrists were bound with coarse rope, as he was half dragged, half led through a maze of torchlit corridors. Cardinal Salvotti strode ahead, red cassock flowing, while two Swiss guards flanked Antonio. They descended deep into the Vatican's undercroft, beneath even the known grottos. Each step plunged them further into darkness and secrecy. They emerged into a narrow stone chapel, hidden far below the basilica. Flickering oil lamps cast elongated shadows on walls, inscribed with Latin exorcisms and Solomonic seals. Waiting there were 3 prelates in soot-black robes, faces hidden by deep cowls. On a central dais lay the heavy doorstone Antonio had opened, pried from its hinges to serve in a binding ritual. Its carved cross glinted dully. Antonio's stomach twisted at the sight. The moment the guards released him, Antonio blurted, "Please, Your Eminence, what are you going to do?" His voice echoed thinly in the cramped chapel. No one answered. One hooded monk sprinkled holy water in a circle around the dais, murmuring in Latin. Another unpacked a massive leather-bound tome covered in dust and locks. By lamplight, Antonio saw its yellowed pages of sigils and incantations. Finally, Cardinal Salvotti stepped forward. His eyes were cold. "We are going to fix your mistake, Father," he said quietly. "And then we will decide what to do with you." He motioned curtly. The guards shoved Antonio to his knees at the dais edge. "Do you comprehend the magnitude of what you've done?" Salvotti whispered. "That creature's very existence is a blasphemy. It was imprisoned under seal and sacrament for good reason. By meddling, you have risked everything." Antonio shuddered. It only wanted to be heard, Eminence," he pleaded. "It spoke of truth." "Silence!" Salvotti's shout cracked like a whip. A cowled cleric flinched and clutched a reliquary in reflex. The cardinal took a breath and continued more evenly. "That thing is no angel of God. It is a fallen one, a tempter with a silver tongue. Do not presume you understand its desires. The first and only duty of the Church here is to ensure it remains forever bound." He knelt and seized Antonio's chin in an iron grip. "Father Antonio, you ignored every warning and opened a vault sealed by blessed men ages ago. You listened to the lies of a demon. Consider yourself fortunate you still draw breath." He shoved Antonio back and rose. "Begin the rite," he snapped to the others. 2 monks hauled Antonio upright and held him within a chalk circle beside the doorstone. The third, Monsignor Belli, an elderly exorcist, began to chant from the grimoire. His sonorous Latin echoed with authority. "Adiuro te spiritus nequissim, revertitur in abyssum, at abyssum." A sudden gust extinguished several lamps. The temperature plummeted. Antonio's skin prickled. Something had answered the summons. He saw the bronze doorstone on the dais tremble as if struck. Belli faltered, but Cardinal Salvotti barked. "Hold fast, continue." The monks' voices rose again in a desperate chorus. Antonio realized with a jolt that the bronze mask, the key, was still tucked under his cincture. In their haste, none had searched him thoroughly, the mask's outline pressed into his ribs. As the exorcists focused on their incantation, Antonio inched his bound hands toward the hidden artifact. Was this, in fact, a sign? Perhaps his presence here with the key was no misfortune, but destiny. The chapel walls vibrated. The chants turned frenzied. Another lamp shattered, plunging half the chapel into darkness. Over the chorus, Salvotti shouted, "Keep chanting." Somewhere beyond the dais came a low, resonant rumble, not born of any human throat. Antonio's heart surged. He felt Sariel's presence swirling like a gathering storm, resisting the rite. "Antonio!" The familiar voice whispered directly in his mind. He clutched the mask tighter beneath his robes. The moment of decision had come. The Church would entomb the truth once more, unless he stopped them. With a trembling breath, Antonio made his choice. He yanked the bronze mask free, and with a cry, sprinted the few steps onto the dais. "No!" Monsignor Belli shouted, breaking off his chant. But Antonio was already slamming the key of the abyss against the carved cross of the doorstone. A thunderous crack split the air. Blinding white light spider-webbed across the stone. The doorstone cleaved cleanly in two with a sound like a giant gong. Antonio was hurled backward.
Sorry, buddy, give me a minute. I'm gonna put it back.
Hard, vision swimming. For an instant, all was silent. Then the earth itself shuddered. The split doorstone collapsed off the dais, revealing a jagged black fissure in the floor. A sulphurous reek wafted out as thick smoke belched up, darkening the chapel. Cardinal Salvotti stumbled back, crossing himself in horror. "Minos, what have you done?" he screamed at Antonio, or at the abyss now yawning open. From the swirling smoke, 2 pinpoints of feral light flared. A massive shape rose from below, unfolding great wings that seemed to blot out the remaining lamplight. Sariel emerged in its full splendor, no longer dimmed, its presence filling the chamber. "Holy Mother, preserve us," one guard whimpered, dropping his rifle as he fell to his knees. Freed from its bonds, the angel towered above them, eyes blazing like twin suns. Broken shackles dangled from its wrists. For an eternal second, no one moved. Antonio struggled to his feet, half blinded by Sariel's radiance and choked by acrid smoke. The silence broke with a single word spoken in the air and in their minds. "Run!" The chapel erupted into chaos. The Swiss guards abandoned their posts and bolted for the tunnel, terror overcoming training. Two of the monks collapsed where they stood, moaning prayers. Cardinal Salvotti remained rooted in place, face a mask of awe and despair as the angel's burning gaze fell upon him. Antonio staggered clear of the dais. Smoke rolled over the floor, and through it he saw Sariel advance one step toward Salvotti. The cardinal trembling, mouthed silent prayers. Sariel's incandescent form loomed, wings stretching to fill the chamber with searing light. The fallen angel raised an arm toward Salvotti. For an instant, Antonio hoped it might show mercy, but a flash of otherworldly light. Salvotti crumpled without a sound. A terrified wail went up from the remaining clergy. Those who could still move fled pell-mell into the dark passage, their prayers turning to screams. In heartbeats they were gone, leaving only swirling smoke, Antonio and the avenging angel. Antonio coughed, half crying from the smoke and the heartbreak of what he'd unleashed. "Sariel," he rasped, unsure if he begged for restraint or offered thanks. Through the thinning smoke, Sariel turned to him. In the angel's blazing eyes, the ember gentleness had returned, tempered with profound sorrow. Amid the wreckage and sulfur, Antonio felt a gentle touch at the edges of his mind. A question, a concern. He realized he was still clutching the bronze mask. It had grown hot, its purpose fulfilled. Above, the stone ceiling groaned ominously. Fine dust rained down as another tremor rumbled. Likely the basilica overhead, suffering the consequences of the abyss, opened below. Sariel stepped nearer, lowering its terrible brightness so that Antonio could bear to look up. The angel inclined its head in a gesture almost like gratitude. "You are free," Antonio whispered, unsure if he spoke to Sariel or reminded himself. Terror and exhilaration warred within him. The great being surveyed him. Though its face was featureless light, Antonio sensed a solemn warmth emanating. In the recesses of his mind, the angel's voice came tenderly. "I will not forget you, Antonio. You have unbound more than my chains this night. You have shaken the towers of falsehood." Before Antonio could reply, the ground convulsed violently. High above, something massive crashed, perhaps part of St. Peter's dome itself. Sariel's head snapped upward, as if hearing a distant call. The angel looked back to Antonio one last time. "Leave this place. The hour of woe has come," it warned, the thought heavy with both regret and urgency. Then, with a powerful beat of its wings, Sariel launched upward. Its blazing form hurtled into the fissure in the chapel floor, vanishing into the swirling darkness beyond. For a heartbeat, Antonio stood alone in the ruined chapel, stunned. The bronze mask slipped from his fingers, clanging away into the pit. It no longer mattered. A monstrous howl echoed up from deep below, the sound of something else stirring in the abyss. Now that its keeper was gone, Antonio's survival instinct kicked in. He turned and fled into the passage, limping on unsteady legs as the undercroft around him quaked. Behind him, the stone altar shattered and the vault began to collapse, showering the tunnel with dust and debris. He ascended through twisting corridors, lit only by emergency lamps, and the red glow of sunrise creeping from above. The tremors did not cease. At last, Antonio burst out of a hidden door onto the floor of St. Peter's Basilica's nave. St. Peter's was in chaos. Tourists and clergy alike were running, shouting in multiple languages. Through swirling dust, Antonio saw a jagged crack rupturing the marble floor near the high altar. Sunlight speared through new holes in the dome far above. Sirens wailed from St. Peter's Square outside. People pointed and cried out at the fissure in the basilica's floor. Sunbeams cut through dusty air where stained glass windows had blown out. Amidst the panic, Antonio stood catching his breath, soot-stained and shaking. He alone understood the enormity of what had occurred. As terrified priests clutched rosaries and sobbing pilgrims huddled together, Antonio knew a greater terror loomed unseen, and the great city fell into ruin and in the earthquake, many were slain, fragment of apocalypse. All around him, the fabric of the Vatican's sanctity was unraveling. Above the din, Antonio thought he heard distant horns or screams. From the sky or from the abyss, he could not tell. Sariel was free in the world now, and the abyss beneath had been opened. Amid collapsing plaster and frantic prayers, Antonio realized with chilling clarity. The first woe had come and passed. Greater horrors would soon follow, and in that day shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. What if the church knew the undead were real, but kept it secret to protect your soul? In the age of enlightenment, when reason ruled and faith was questioned, a priest named Father Anselm uncovered reports that defied both scripture and science. Corpses that refused to decay, eyes that opened beneath the grave, and cries from lips long silenced by death. These weren't myths. They were documented by doctors, soldiers, and clergymen alike.
Yeah, I just hit this one to go next.
The more horrifying the truth became. Not just about vampires, but about what they revealed of God, damnation, and us. Welcome to Tales of Mythology.
Energy Clash.
Ancient legends, forgotten horrors, and supernatural wars come to life. If you love exploring the untold side of mythology, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell below, so you never miss another legendary story. What if even an age of reason cannot silence the whispers of the undead? Father Anselm, a scholar of theology, steeped in Enlightenment rationality, pondered this question as he sat by a flickering oil lamp. Rumors had reached him of corpses that walked, of graves yielding not peace but terror. By all logic, such monstrous impossibilities should have died out in these enlightened times. Was it not Voltaire himself who scoffed, "What? Is it in our 18th century that vampires exist?" Yet the questions gnawed at Anselm's mind. Could the tales be mere peasant superstitions, or a sign of something dreadfully real that defied both science and scripture? Weeks earlier, a dispatch had arrived from the military frontier in the Habsburg lands. Within it lay the testimony of panicked villagers in a Serbian hamlet called Kisilova. Reading the translated copy, Anselm felt a chill. The letter recounted a series of mysterious deaths following the burial of a peasant named Peter Plagojevich. On their deathbeds, the victims claimed a terrible visitor pressed upon them at night. They said that the above-mentioned Peter Plagojevich, who had died 10 weeks earlier, had come to them in their sleep, laid himself on them, and throttled them. Even Plagojevich's own widow fled the village, swearing that her deceased husband had returned to demand his shoes. Anselm muttered a prayer and steadied his trembling hand. He reminded himself that such stories of spectral stranglers and restless corpses must have natural explanations. Perhaps a sickness spread from the grave, or mass hysteria gripped the town. As a man of faith and reason, he had devoted his life to dispelling darkness with truth. Now he felt duty-bound to investigate this macabre mystery on behalf of both church and academy. If demons or delusions were at work, he would uncover it. Thus, Father Anselm embarked on a journey eastward, leaving behind the gaslit libraries of Vienna for the mud and dusk of rural villages. He carried with him an assortment of scholarly treatises, a well-worn Bible, and the imperial missive that officially invited him to observe the strange case. The further he traveled from cosmopolitan order, the more he sensed the old fears stirring in the countryside. At roadside inns, locals crossed themselves at any mention of the recently deceased. In one tavern, a toothless old man recounted how an unnaturally rosy corpse had been found in a nearby burial ground years ago, only silenced by a stake through its heart. Anselm noted the details with clinical detachment, but inside, anxiety coiled. What am I riding into, he wondered. When he finally arrived in Kisilova under a slate-gray sky, he found the village in mourning and in dread. Doors were marked with crude crosses. The air reeked of garlic strung along thresholds. Villagers eyed the newcomer priest with a mix of hope and terror, as if begging for deliverance from an invisible plague. That evening, Anselm gathered the elders and the local Orthodox priest, Father Georgi, to hear their accounts firsthand. By the glow of tallow candles, voices hushed and quavering, they spoke of 9 sudden deaths in just a week. Each victim had been healthy until, after a single day of fever and fright, they expired. And each, in their final hours, blamed one name, Plogojevich. Father Georgi confessed that he had joined the imperial official, a certain Mr. Frombold, in exhuming the accused man's grave. His body, the priest said with a haunted look, was untouched by decay, almost lifelike. Anselm's rational mind wrestled with the impossibility. How could a corpse interred for 10 weeks appear fresh? The physician in him raised the possibility of natural preservation or winter's chill slowing rot. But the villagers had already drawn their conclusion. Plogojevich was a vampire, one of the dreaded Upiri of Balkan lore. Trying to maintain composure, Anselm asked what they did next. One of the elders, eyes downcast, recounted the grim ritual. A sharpened wooden stake driven through the corpse's chest, and a pyre set alight.
I have another one playing after this. The villagers had taken matters into their own hands, performing what the church would deem a profane act upon a human body. Mr. Frombold's official report, which Anselm carried in his satchel, carefully absolved the authorities of blame for this grisly deed. With a lovely bureaucratic flourish, the provisor had even implored that if any mistake had been made, it be attributed not to me but to the rabble, who were beside themselves with fear. Late that night, Father Anselm lit a candle in the small wooden chapel and read the full text of Frombold's report by its wavering light. Each line tested the limits of his belief. The letter described how Plogojevich's exhumed corpse showed new slight. Anselm's heart pounded as he reached the report's horrifying climax. Not without astonishment, I saw some fresh blood in his mouth. In short, all the indications were present that such people, as remarked above, are said to have. After the Pope and I had seen this spectacle, all the subjects sharpened a stake and put this at his heart, whereupon, as he was pierced, not only did much blood, completely fresh, flow, but still other wild signs, which I passed by out of high respect, took place. Father Anselm set down the manuscript, hands shaking. The dry bureaucratic language could not mask the horror of what it described. Fresh blood gushed from a staked corpse, a groan from the dead man's throat as the stake went in. He whispered a prayer for Plogojevich's soul, wondering in that moment whether he was praying in vain. The rational part of his mind recoiled. These must be exaggerations or mistakes, and yet the testimony bore the seal of imperial officials and a parish priest. Alone in the silent chapel, Anselm realized that his journey had only begun. The old certainties of the Enlightenment felt less solid tonight. If this report was true, how could it be reconciled with his theology, with natural law? Steeling himself, the theologian resolved to seek out more evidence. He would travel next to the site of another notorious case, rumored to have occurred nearby. Armed with his faith and reason, Father Anselm stepped out into the moonlit churchyard, determined and afraid of what he might find as the mystery deepened. Could faith alone steel a man's nerves when confronted with the horrors of the grave? Father Anselm repeated this prayer in his mind as he arrived in the village of Medveja. Imperial officers had summoned him to observe another vampire panic here. Not long ago, a former soldier named Arnold Pauli had died in this village under unusual circumstances. Villagers whispered that his restless spirit was now attacking the living. Anselm met the investigation's leader at the edge of a churned-up graveyard at dawn. The officer recounted Arnold's strange story. The man had once been troubled by a vampire, wherefore he had eaten from the earth of the vampire's grave, and had smeared himself with the vampire's blood in. Yet despite these precautions, Arnold Pauli himself had supposedly risen from death to prey on his neighbors. And over the past few months, at least a dozen villagers of all ages had perished after brief, inexplicable illness. Act by Arnold. Under imperial decree, a full inquiry was launched. Father Anselm steeled himself as he joined the party of soldiers and surgeons in exhuming the suspected victims from the body of Arnold Pauli. One by one, coffins were pried open. Many contained ordinary decayed corpses, but to Anselm's astonishment, some were remarkably well preserved. One elderly woman, said to have been gaunt in life, lay plump and rosy in death.
When the army surgeon pierced her skin, crimson blood spurted from the cut. Around the grave, onlookers gasped in unison. Ansel felt a wave of nausea wash over him. How could a corpse interred weeks ago bleed as if alive? He whispered a psalm under his breath, clutching his crucifix as they proceeded to the next grave. Finally, they reached Arnold Paule's own resting place. As the lid was lifted, Anselm's heart pounded. There lay Arnold's corpse, intact and eerily lifelike in appearance, despite having been buried 40 days prior. The stench of disturbed death filled the air, yet Arnold's flesh looked flush with unnerving vitality. The investigators hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Then, according to both local custom and grim necessity, they acted. With a swift motion and a dull thud, a sharpened stake was driven through the heart of Arnold's corpse. In that instant, a low groan escaped the dead man's lips, and a great gout of blood welled from the wound. Cries of terror erupted from the gathered villagers. Father Anselm nearly dropped his lantern in shock. Though he had braced for something unnatural, witnessing this grotesque semblance of life in a corpse left him trembling. The remains of Arnold Paule were swiftly burned to ash, and those ashes reinterred in hallowed ground, as the ritual remedy demanded. By nightfall, an official report was drafted to document the findings in Medveja. It soberly catalogued each chilling detail that Father Anselm had witnessed with his own eyes. How would such a report be received in the salons of the Enlightenment, or the halls of the church? Riding westward the next morning, Anselm felt the weight of what he carried, both the written testimonies and the burden of knowledge. The evidence of the undead was no longer confined to peasant rumors. It was signed and sealed by military officers and doctors. The unthinkable had become undeniable. As the sun rose, Father Anselm realized that the real struggle was only beginning. How would the learned world, grounded in reason and faith, contend with proof that the dead walked and fed on the living?
How the fuck did you...
What happens when reasonable men are confronted with the unreasonable?
Yes.
Father Anselm faced this very question upon returning to the Baroque halls of his abbey. Summoned before an assembly of church scholars and local officials, he laid out the gruesome evidence gathered from the vampire-plagued villages. By candlelight in a vaulted chamber, he recounted the uncanny details. The undecomposed corpses, the ruddy blood, the terrifying groan of Arnold Paule's staked body. His audience, abbots, have you ever wondered what secrets lie buried beneath the most sacred place on earth? Not relics, not bones, but a prison, sealed for millennia by popes and saints, guarded by silence and shadow. What if I told you that beneath the splendor of the Vatican lies a truth so terrifying it was hidden not to protect it from us, but to protect us from it? That one night, the seals cracked, the darkness stirred, and something ancient, older than the church, older than Rome, began to whisper again. This is not just a story, this is a warning. Read on if you dare. Welcome to Tales of Mythology, where ancient legends, forgotten horrors, and supernatural wars come to life. If you love exploring the untold side of mythology, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell below, so you never miss another legendary story. Midnight cloaked the Vatican in a silence so deep, it seemed the stones themselves held their breath. Beneath the weight of centuries, the marble corridors pulsed with unseen tension. The scent of wax and incense lingered, but beneath it, fainter, yet unmistakable, was something older, something buried, something awake.